Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Katerina Schrey, along with my co-host, Dr. Victor Fet, and our program producer, Professor Larry Schrey. We host MUkraine, a weekly discussion panel on Russia's war on Ukraine, with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally, and we very much appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. Please feel free to use the chat to post questions for our guests. A quick reading to our viewers in Ukraine. Вітаємо наших слухачів в Україні з глибоким поклоном. Ми далі свідки вашого страшного терпіння і також вашої великої сили. Дякую вам за вашу участь в нашій тижневій програмі. And today's guests will be introduced by Dr. Victor Fet.
Thank you, Katerina. And today, our 135th weekly meeting of MUkraine discussion group is a special event, well prepared by a group of translators. We will be reading English language poems, which are translations of Russian and Ukrainian original poetry written by several people, several poets now in Ukraine and out of it. The participating translators will introduce themselves. We have an international group, Maria Bloshteyn, joining from Toronto, Canada, Richard Coombes and Josephine Zitzewitz from United Kingdom, Yana Kane from New Jersey, Dmitri Manin from California, and myself included. We hope this poetry reading will inspire you to help Ukraine. And one way to do this is to donate to US-based nonprofit called Razom, dedicated to build the prosperous Ukraine. We had a guest in 2022, a board member of Razom right here, Marina Prikhotko. Once again, welcome everyone. Thank you for watching, everyone who will be looking at this literary complex program, Poetry from Ukraine in English language. I pass the moderatorship to Yana Kane, our guest and translator. Please, Yana, tell us more.
Actually, I will invite Maria Bloshteyn, who is also a member of Kopilka. She was one of the founders of Kopilka. I joined later, so she will say a few words about Kopilka. Masha, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Victor, for hosting us. We're very happy to be here. It's nice to see my colleagues. I don't get to see them a lot. We correspond quite a bit, but I don't see their faces. So it's nice to see everyone. The best way to introduce the Kopilka would be to read the opening introduction, a couple of paragraphs from the introduction of the newest anthology that the Kopilka team brought out. It's hot off the press. It's called Dislocation. And our two wonderful, intrepid editors, Yulia Nemirovskaya and Anna Krushelnitskaya, wrote a very good, very succinct introduction about what the Kopilka is, what the project has been, and what really attracted all of us to it. So without any more ado, I'll just read the first opening paragraphs of the introduction. When Russia took over parts of Ukraine in 2014, leading to what in 2022 would become the first full-scale war in Europe since World War II, Russia's government-controlled media claimed that the rationale for the war was the safekeeping of the so-called Ruski Mir, the Russian world. As presented by Russian state propaganda, the Russian world evokes an unsettling resemblance to Hitlerite ideology, constructing an image of a superior and sacred geographic, historical, cultural, and linguistic space. It also propagates the preservation of conservative values that contrast the perceived moral corruption of the modern Western civilization. In counterstrike, Russian and Russophone poets of Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Israel, USA, Canada, Germany, and other countries immediately began recording their horror and outrage at the war and making their records public through social networks, blogs, and performances. In early 2022, the poet and scholar Yulia Nemirovskaya founded the Kopilka project. The original mandate was for the Kopilka, or the coin bank, was to collect and preserve the work of poets in Russia who faced the threat of persecution and incarceration for speaking out against the so-called special military operation in Ukraine. Soon, the Kopilka expanded to include the work of Russophone poets everywhere in the world. As the war dragged on and the anti-war poetic output grew, the Kopilka grew as well. It gained more voices, perspectives, texts, and tongues. Translators into English, German, French, Hungarian, and other languages volunteered to work on the poems that spoke to them and to place their translations in magazines and collections. Thus, what was once solo literary pickets staged by poet protesters turned into an anti-war poetic rally. Diverse and idiosyncratic poetic voices were joined in a dramatic choir. Like the masked chanters of a Greek chorus, Kopilka poets formulate the moral issues of the war and other commentary on death and suffering in a much needed language of witness, a language many believed impossible to conjure after the first shock of the war struck them mute. And over the past year and a half, the Kopilka has served as a source for three anthologies of anti-war poetry, Non à la guerre in French, and Disbelief, 100 anti-war poems in English and Russian that was brought out by Smokestack Books. And Dislocation, which is what we're sort of the event that we're sort of marking right now, is the third and the largest Kopilka anthology to date. It reflects both the torrents of civic poetry written during the years of war and the new shifts in the course of the war and the lives of the poets who wrote it. I don't have a copy, unfortunately, to show you, but you can, well, I don't have it here physically, but you can see it there up on screen. It's out with Slavica Press. The two covers that we have, Disbelief and Dislocation, are both by the amazing artist Maria Kazanska, who I don't know how, but she managed to create the portraits of all of us. I've heard many people say that looks just like me. And indeed, she managed to capture the expressions that, you know, we all felt in this stunning sort of visual form. And the covers are amazing, I think. So we have the translators who are a part of the team are, of course, Anna Krushenitska, who also contributes her own poetry, Yana Kane, who also contributes her poetry and translates, Josie von Zitzewitz, Andrei Boraga, Richard Coombes, Dmitri Manin, and yours truly. So that is all I'd like to say about the Kopilka project and about Dislocation. And maybe we should just, without further ado, we should just move to the poems and read the translations.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Victor. So I am Richard. I am a literary translator. I translate mainly from Russian, prose and verse, but also some Ukrainian poetry and song lyrics. And this first poem is in Ukrainian in the original, and it's by Irina Ivanchenko. Irina is from Kiev, and she still lives there. And she writes in both Ukrainian and Russian. Listen a while, my lord, and let me tell you things I need to hear. You'll find no trace of hatred in me. Pain is all I feel for those whose souls this war has burned to ash. And from that ash, from everything profane, I've plucked my child and fled to the world's far end, away from siren song and lilac rain that soaks like living water my dried out hands. Your gift to me is the world, fruit that won't harm, a roof between my child and heaven's blue. You carried me over 3 borders in your arms. So tell me now, what can I do for you? Words are my refuge. They help to quell my fear. What talent do I have? To love and breathe out poems. You fill my path with good people and sincere. So tell me now, what should I do for others? I feel I'm chasing someone else's spring, and my soul is running, but falling behind. I have no peace, no sleep, though lack no thing that you've been able to give me. or had in mind. Okay, this next is Vadim Roisman. Vadim is also Ukrainian from Kiev. He's lived in Israel for a long time, but it's been obvious since, especially since the large-scale invasion began, that a part of his heart will always be in Ukraine, and it's really caused him a lot of grief. We know that because we know him. This is his poem, A Year of War. Our faces have been turned to mortuary stone, petrified by weariness and weeping. These days, who fears God's judgment throne? Who still believes in hell, its pain, its reaping? And suppose there may be found a trembling soul to dread that lake of grieving deeply stored. I have one single care, one single goal, to be the man I am before the Lord. So the last two I'm going to read are both by Vitaly Kovalchuk. Vitaly is from Krasnohrad in Kharkiv Oblast, Kharkiv region, which is sort of southwest of Kharkiv city, but he now lives in Kharkiv city, and he has done throughout the full-scale invasion. And these two poems were written nearly a year and a half apart, in September of 2022 and February of 2024. And I think you will hear, when you hear them, the toll that the constant bombardment of Kharkiv and the permanent state of war and threat in Ukraine, the toll that it's taken on Vitaly. Now, this first poem is a personal favorite of mine. It's one of the ones I have most enjoyed translating. It just has a beautiful sense of place where he captures Kharkiv. The maple leaves have turned the color of amber. Rain teems without mercy from the skies. And here I am. I've lived to see October in Saltivka, in Kharkiv, in my high rise. Severe, but still with beauty of its own. Caught in the carnage, the bloodshed, the ill will, my Saltivka block, its bullet-riddled stone, still standing, still surviving, living still. The darkness has not done for this great city, and little store is put in medal stands in Sarzen Yar and Novi Budinki and Pivdeny Vokzal with its trams. She's eased herself into my blood, this city. No drama, no makeup, that's not her way. And that distinctive what they have in Kharkiv seems already in my DNA. Saltivka, autumn dawn, one more night over. Leaves, the scamps, are flying wild and free. And here I am. I've lived to see October, meaning I'll live to see our victory. When you've come back someday through tribulation, and I'm clinging to your shoulder like a child, don't ask how past these years of separation. Most likely I won't say a single word. Don't ask how sorrow piled up in such measure, and how many times we lost the thread of hope. I'll tell you myself, when we're let go, if ever it lets us go, someday it has to stop. And I won't ask why faces have faded away, why smiles are no longer the smiles that I recall, and how you crossed 3 borders in one day, how you found any words for the children at all. We will be silent. Silence is our reward for all these years burned up without a trace. But when it's let us go, the words we've stored will tumble out. It will let go, yes? And finally we'll talk. We'll say it all, the bombs, how winter brought us to the brink, the sky on fire, time's slow and circular crawl. But that will be a different us, I think. Thank you.
I know that Victor you're still on. Good. I know you're having that
I'm here.
thunderstorm. Okay, good.
I'm here. I'm having thunderstorm outside, but so far I'm here, and I'm very happy to present a couple of very special poems from a book by Grigory Falkovich, who is one of the most known children's poets of Ukraine, writing both in Ukrainian and Russian. With his family, Falkovich fled to Western Ukraine. They are in Kolomia now, since March 2022, with his family and his dog, Rudy. The book, which I had privilege to translate, Rudy and the Milky Way, was the original, published in Ukrainian last year, was voted the best children's Ukrainian book of 2023. And the translation, 11 poems with beautiful illustrations by Irina Potapenko, also a refugee, was published by Oleg Fedorov Publishing House in Kiev this summer. I will read 2 poems from Falkovich's book. They are all about, or written, many of them are written from the person of the refugee dog. Rudy and the Milky Way. I lay down, stood up again, took a little walk. I recalled 2 wise old dogs having a serious talk. They conversed about old days, what people do and are. True or not, it was said before, those who perish in a war turn into a star. Same is true of any dogs who were lost in fight, mongrel ones or fancy breeds, but they don't shine as bright. Not everyone can see those stars twinkling up in space, only people who love their dogs in their earthly days. That is where the secret lies, known to dogs who are old and wise. Some of us, when facing skies, always see a pitch-dark night. Others see a road of light. Rudy and the Night Flight. Rudy dreamed that he could fly, o'er villages and towns. He was flying in the sky with a flock of chattering birds. Where are you flying to, they ask? Warsaw, Paris, Prague, or Rome? Or to some unknown lands? No, he says, I'm flying home. In the city, hit by shells, did my house survive and stand? Where are daisies, rexes, rockies, they saved from bombs and rockets? Even cats in the neighborhood I would call my friends for good. If I find their calm and peace, I will fly back all the way through the storm and rain and thunder, and I know what I'll say. Though it's good to come and visit, let us go home today. Rudy sighed and yawned wide and went on flying through the night. Thank you. On the left, you see the original book in Ukrainian, and on the right, you see the original Rudy dog and the author's great-granddaughter, Esther, was born a few months before the war.
Thank you, Richard. Now I will read poems by 3 poets. All 3 of them are from Kharkiv. The first is Dmitri Bliznyuk. And here's a picture of Dmitri with his book that just came out actually days ago. I was replacing the slide yesterday to put in these photographs. It's his first book of poetry in Ukrainian. He translated his own. He has been writing poetry in Russian all these years, and now he started translating his own poetry into Ukrainian. And this book, On the Other Side of the Ashes, was just published by Gerda in Dnipro, Ukraine. And the cover of this book shows a picture of the city, and it shows shards. It shows shrapnel, basically. Dmitri has been sending me pictures of this shrapnel from, a bomb, so-called cab bomb, that landed near his house and from other places. And they're oddly beautiful. They look sort of like semi-precious stones. They have this odd, disturbing beauty. So here's his poem. My fish will stay alive. Just for a moment, what do they feel, the catfish and the carp, when their pond is hit by a rocket? Steel shrapnel burst through the brick wall, tore apart the aquarium as if it were a paper bag of water and glass splinters. She crashed to the floor. Across her back, fanned wet strands of hair interwoven with kelp. An angelfish jumped around on the linoleum next to her face, a bright comma of life, suffocating. But she was unscathed, not a scratch. Her legs just got stuck together like hard candy, acquired a dusty bluish tint, the color of moonlit fish scales. She didn't utter a word. She became a mermaid, her fins and her slippers. She crunched across the wet, shattered glass, headed to the kitchen, poured water into a saucepan. She gathered the 4 small fish and the snail, searched for her cigarettes on the windowsill. Warm wind kissed her fingers, their webbing, the wedding ring. My fish will stay alive. The next poet is Andrei Kostinsky, and here's a picture that Andrei took of his apartment after it got hit and incinerated by a rocket. I live as if within this world I am no more. I shake an offered hand, respond to words, but make no sense. Above my head, sunlike the sun. The moon glints from a well, a bucket deeply sunk. Memory immolated, ashes ankle high around my feet. At checkpoints, your residency papers, cigarettes. Should I and myself meet, I'd say one of us is no longer here. I am called, uncalled, approach the caller, a skylined window framing an empty space. I search the courtyard in the post-explosion rubble. There may be keepsakes of a life that's now erased. I found plush toys, a bunny and a mouse. A shockwave swept them off the sinking floors. Telemok world sheltering them allows my murdered home to enter fairy tale doors. So Telemok is literally in Russian, it means a little tower. And it's the name of a fairy tale, a folk tale that's told to small children, and it lists all the little animals like bunny and mouse and hedgehog who come to live in this little house out in the woods. When I first approached Andrei Kostinsky for permission to translate his poetry and to put it into Kopilka, as I do with all the poets I translate, he wrote me an email. This was in February of 2023. And the quote of it from it struck me so much that I asked his permission to sort of make it public. And here's the translation into English of his quote, of his email. I believe that it's precisely the points where the activities of writers from both countries, not the governments, meet, Ukraine and Russia, that will start easing the tensions between ordinary people, those who are not in politics or the military. However, this will be a long journey, and it will specifically involve those Russian writers who have not stained themselves by participating in the literary processes of the belligerent Russian Federation. And so for me, this was very inspiring to think that, you know, the work that the poets are doing and that we are doing in the Kopilka project, that it somehow can help when the time of healing comes, when I hope that Ukraine is free and at peace, and back on building a prosperous future for itself. I hope that there will be a healing, and I hope that the kind of poetry, both, you know, like Masha said, from Ukraine, but also from Belarus and Russia and the Greek chorus of all the people outside of these countries who write in Russian, that it will somehow be one of the seed crystals that will allow some form of healing. And the third poet, also from Kharkiv, is Oleg Ladizhinsky. He is a poet, and he's also a science fiction writer. He writes together with his friend, with his coworker, with his colleague Dmitri, and together they sort of formed this English English language writer, and they gave him a biography, Henry Lyon Oldie. And they write wonderful science fiction together. And here is the URL of their portal where you can actually buy and read books in Russian, in Ukrainian, and also a lot of translations into English. So both poetry and science fiction. And I think that the poem I will read to you, you will see that it's written by somebody who has the perspective, the worldview of a fiction writer. Start by showing them happy, contented. A prologue, 3 pages, not more. Ripples of sunlight on silky eyelashes. Darting dragonflies over the shore. Then let rip. Iron rain, crashing thunder, pools of blood under trees split asunder. Long dark roads, mud and dust, mud and snow. No, start over. The scent of plum blossoms, a prologue, 3 pages to show how happy they are, how contented. And afterward, don't touch them. Let go. Thank you.
Hello, and I'm very grateful to be here. I'm Josephine von Zitzewitz. I actually exclusively translate from Russian. I unfortunately don't have confident enough Ukrainian. And the first poet I'm going to read is Olena Maksakova, who is originally from Kharkiv. She has been living in Germany for many years, so she went there way before the war, and she continues to write in Russian. Relocatia by Olena Maksakova. During my Kharkiv childhood, I loved Scythian stone women, strong women, hard women, eternal women. In a museum in Berlin, I spotted familiar, dear Scythian faces. My dear girls from Kharkiv, you survived. You don't know about the death of your poor sisters. You managed to leave. The mills of God grind slowly, but they will grind us up. Plans, hopes, paper lanterns. All will prove useful for the history they forced us to write. Tebe tamene, you and me. And the next poet is Inna Kutsenko from Odessa. The 8th of March, snow effortlessly sails on feathery wings. My Russian friend, try to predict how death bursts forth at the next turn. Which flower's guise death will use to approach the bones of half-burned houses, so that she blossoms like the moon, blood-red in its eclipse. My stranger friend, you know how guilt and war are relatives, how war can burn, just like the cries of silence scream in a baby's heart gone quiet. How childhood and old age huddle in basements, while youth must lick her wounds. My former friend, what did you fail to say when early in the morning winter bled?
Thank you, Josie. Hi all, thank you for inviting me to this event. My name is Dmitri. I will read two poems, one by Viktor Solodchuk, who writes in Russian and Ukrainian. And if I'm not mistaken, he's actually here. And I would like to ask him to read the first stanza of his poem. Can you do that, Victor?
Yeah, certainly. Greetings, dear colleagues. Greetings from Odessa, and thank you for this mental and spiritual support of Ukraine. I want to share with you my happy moment of my life. I had a daughter the day before yesterday. We named her Sophia Victoria. The birth was not easy, and ballistic missiles flew at Odessa that night as well. So such epic times call for appropriate lyrics, and I am very grateful to Dmitri Manin for the excellent translation. So actually the poem. UA Windrose. Українська роза вітрів. Ті, що приходять з заходу, шикуються черепахою, не відчувають запаху через вживання заходів, мають високі стіни, широкі крила. Зброя у них кремінна, воля їх полохлива. Більше за все на світі цінують здоровий сон. Куняти на оксамиті, схропувати в унісон. Ті, що приходять зі сходу, схожі на трьох царів. Перший не знає броду, другий позбувся дарів, третій штампує клонів, хто зна, чого ради, мовчки пуска драконів на автостради. Ті, що приходять з півдня, жили колись, як ми, обладунки їх мідні, в бліндажах килими, рухаються в обозі з краденими валами, в'яжуть міста в облозі морськими вузлами, не залишаючи свідків замітають порожні сліди, не пам'ятаючи, звідки вони йдуть і куди. Ті, що приходять з півночі, з'являються уночі. Ноги їх схожі на північі, в руках рогачі, стілюються іконами, варять пшоно без вогню, рухаються колонами, несуть маячню, присягаючись небом, палять бензин і трави. Вірити їм не треба за жодних обставин.
Thank you very much, Victor, and heartfelt congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll read the translation. Windrows. Those who come from the west come in the tortoise formation. They take measures of substance which affects their olfaction. Their wingspan is broad, their walls are high. They make weapons of flint. They're weak-willed and shy. They value catching some snores more than anything else, believing that snoring in chorus is good for mental health. Those who come from the east, they resemble three kings. The first one has lost his way, the second, the gift he brings. The third one is spawning clones. Why, he wouldn't say. He sends dragons and drones along the highway. Those who come from the south once lived just like us. They wear armor of bronze, their dugouts are hung with rugs. They move in wagon trains with stolen oxen and yoke. They strangle cities and sieges until they choke. They leave no witnesses standing and cover their tracks. They forget where they're heading and never look back. Those who come from the north come in the dead of night, walking on roosters' feet, carrying pitchforks and fight. They heal themselves with icons. They don't use fire to cook. They march forward in columns, spewing gobbledygook. They like to swear by heaven and burn gas and grasses. They shouldn't be trusted ever, in any circumstances. And the second poem I would like to read is by Irina Yevsa, a Kharkiv poet. She is somewhere in Europe these days. Soon, he said, I shall be leaving this rickety boat. Day by day, I feel my strength dwindle. War shoves its bony hand deep down my throat, scoops me out with a rusty ladle. There isn't much left inside, not a leaf, not a vine, not a river, a bog, a boulder. Look, he said, how light it is, this shell of mine, even lighter than a fish bladder. I leave my hole to get some food, then go back to sleep. No TV, no books, nothing doing. I've become a complete neurotic, a total creep. Freud won't help me, and neither will Jung. With your stainless palette knife, scrape us off, dear Lord, off the ground, to darkness and calm. No poetry, please, it's not something we can afford. Now it's only vigils and psalms. I shiver as if I'm stuck with a nasty cold, and the air on my tongue feels chilly. I've been eating from paper bowls, for my hand can't hold the regular ones without spilling. Christmas trees at the market, candles variously scented, window garlands down the side. I can't see the whole, for everything is fragmented, broken down, and scattered wide. And then he said, When the judgment blast comes to blow it all to pieces, to dust and fuzz, Lord, put me back together, but not as a poet, as a lighthouse keeper, because he sees light and knows that darkness doesn't control it. It's his hand that does. Thank you.
Okay, so on to me. I'm going to be reading two poets by Yana Wisniewska. Yana was born in Zaporizhia and she had lived there all her life. In fact, she never traveled out of Ukraine. She's a philologist and an editor. And the poems came to her suddenly, she says, in 2014 when she was in her 20s. And she's been writing them ever since. And the two poems that I'm going to read, she says they were written at the very beginning of the war, which is actually when I saw them. There was widespread panic, she says. People were leaving in droves, and I clearly realized that I wasn't going anywhere, although a backpack with all the essentials was sitting in the hallway just in case the apartment got bombed. It was very frightening then. Now it's not frightening. Rather, my body is afraid. It reacts, but my mind doesn't. These two poems were written in a state of an inverted world, of horror, but at the same time of love. Love for what is mercilessly being destroyed, in a state of some absurd faith and light at that moment. It seemed that a new dimension appeared in my consciousness, a readiness for death. And at the same time, there was an almost painful reaction to everything alive and beautiful that still remains in the world. I really hope, she says, that this is reflected in the texts. So, the first poem. I can't seem to select the right jars, containers, perfume bottles, tubes, pantyhose, books, dresses, shoes, underwear, candies, memories, so that I can take only what's most needed. I make my sift through it all, change it, repack it, cut down on it, then add again to what's most needed. Decide what's less needed, what's more needed, what's vitally needed, vitally heartbreaking, vitally heartfelt. I try to fit all of my former life into a backpack, a slew of feathers, pendants, toys, fridge magnets, hair clips, dreams, bookmarks, candy wrappers, postcards, letters, notebooks, purses, bus tickets with lucky numbers. But it doesn't fit into the backpack. So I get another bag, a large one. No, a small one is better. And once again, I begin this hopeless selection. But the perfume bottle, jars, containers, tubes, candy wrappers, memories, dresses and books, pointless feathers, mystery boxes can't be reduced. I can see that. So I sit on the floor amid scattered pieces of myself. And sorry, I can hardly see this. So I sit on the floor amid scattered pieces of myself, amid clues of my former interrupted life, and choose to stay here with me. The second poem is also by Yana, also written at the very beginning of the war. And if we die during this frosty march, a scattered deck of mortal praying cards, whether decayed or frozen into ice amid the rubble of our wrecked high-rise homes, under the starlight or beneath the sun, killed in our twilight years, or else cut down while in our prime, however it transpired when caught by the accursed enemy fire. Still, spring will come for us no matter what. It'll come for us alone, none other. And there'll be birdsong, leaves, warm cracked asphalt, and couples kissing underneath the flowering boughs. We'll turn into a leaf, a tree, a crow, a chickadee, a river's mist, a cirrus strand, a seashell, the contour of an offered hand, the somber silence, and the giggling fits, the amber sun, the golden sand. And though we're scared out of our wits, and hatred both disorients and stings, we'll make it yet to God and spring. You'll see. We're almost spring already. Thank you.
I don't know if Victor is still, how his connection is holding up, but maybe we should pause here and see if there are questions or comments.
I'm here, yes. Thank you all. It was absolutely powerful, and we definitely have time, and we want questions or comments from our audience. We have large number of live people present. I see people from Ukraine as well. We are very honored to have you all here. Please, translators, open your cameras, Mitya, if you can, and please comments or questions.
And I think people hopefully can do them over video, but if not, for any reason, maybe into chat. I'll monitor chat.
Please do use chat. Katerina, please.
Oh, the chat is very active, and I'm actually fighting back tears. That was beautiful. All of it was beautiful. Sorry, I didn't expect to get this emotional. Thank you for using your talent in this amazingly empathetic and healing way, both to the poets and to the translators. Your skills are amazing. I'm truly grateful and amazed at what you're doing for us. So I don't have any questions. I don't even have a comment. I just have an emotional reaction. This was absolutely profound. And I'm so grateful to y'all for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shrey. We understand that power transcends languages, but of course, English is a rich language on its own. I hope that this reading adds something even to those purely Anglophone people who can't appreciate the originals. I invite questions or comments from the audience, or maybe from the translators themselves. If just a couple of sentences you can share with us, please.
I will say that I feel that it's a real privilege to be a translator of this kind of poetry, because it gives words to something that sometimes, sometimes I'm struck dumb. I have lost my ability to write poetry in Russian, for example. And through the poets' words and voices, I find a way back to sort of having a language.
Thank you, Yana. Yes, the world changed for especially those of us who, like Yana and myself, have Russian as our native language. We are looking for private language of our own now, and many of us indeed find it in translation, in connecting these languages. But I will not talk at length, because we are hosts, and we are very grateful for all of you who could contribute today.
I do have a question, just now that I've sort of like processed my emotional reaction. I thank you all very much for sharing a little bit about the poets whose work you're translating. That was genuinely interesting, and I'm wondering, your craft is not haphazard. You've connected with the poets that you are translating. I'm wondering if any of you would be willing to share your story, how you came across the poet you were translating, how you selected that poem. What is there a level of cooperation, collaboration? How did these translations come into being?
I can say a little bit about Olena Maksakova, who actually, I didn't say that before reading the translations. She used to write a lot of experimental stuff, like high lyrical stuff, poets' poetry. And she says that after the war started, well, she's only been able to write this civic poetry, and it's her way of engaging, expressing, and it's a complete change from the style that she had before. So these very short, very accessible poems that are part of a huge collection, actually, of similar poems. And I just want to say also how much I appreciate being able to hear the poems, the English translations alive, because when you read a lot of them and when you read a lot of it both in the original and in translation, you become a little bit, I don't know, inured to their effect. And having a very few selector poems, it makes such a difference. I actually share you said you became very emotional. I really became emotional when Richard read the Kovalchuk. It has such tremendous force. Thank you very much for making this possible.
I love that you described these poems as accessible. I love that. That is like the poet. It truly is for everybody. It truly is something that all of us can rejoice in and experience. Thank you for your contribution to this panel.
Maybe a couple of words from me. I'm not a poet. I don't write my own poetry or prose for the matter. I'm not a very articulate person at all. And when the war began, we all felt kind of mute, in search and scrambling for words. And on the other hand, a lot of poetry started gushing, literally gushing on my Facebook feed. And translating them into Russian is a kind of symbiotic relationship, because they give me language, they give me words that I don't have on my own, and I give them an avenue into a new audience, into a new language. And that was, for a while, kind of the only thing that I was able to do. So it was basically 2 years of translating war poetry non-stop. Almost all other projects set on a back burner.
Yeah, if I could, yeah, Mitya has finished. Yeah, I think, I suppose as somebody who spoke Russian and was already a literary translator, I didn't really know what to do when the full-scale war broke out, because there was no longer any way to hide from how Russia was and what, its intentions were. And I wasn't going to carry on with my projected literary translation career. I always set myself, long before the full-scale war broke out, to give a voice to people who I thought deserved a voice. So I've never, bothered to translate sort of the so-called Russian classics, etc. I'm not interested in redoing that. I want to give a voice to people who don't have a voice. So I suppose that bit didn't change, but more or less everything else changed at the start of the war. And I joined the Kopilka team. And Kopilka is just a huge library of poems. And I think all of us just read and read and read. And every now and then a poem would jump out and I'd just say, I have got to translate this poem. So I don't engage with anything that doesn't absolutely get me and grab me, but there's a lot of it that does. How the poems come together is, Katerina, you asked about the interaction between us and the poets. And I've only got my story. I do try and make contact with all of them, and I'm sure I have made contact with all the poets, and they take they play the part they want to play. So people like Vitali, or he's a case in point, Vitali Kovalchuk, he will say, Richard, I just don't have the English, but thank you so much for giving me this English voice. Others will be a bit more confident and say, Richard, are you sure you've got this illusion? Or are you quite sure, what I had in mind was this? Did you see that I had that in mind? So they'll let me into their heads, which you have to get into, don't you? One way or another, you've got to get into their head. So it depends on the poet. I reach out and they engage the way they feel able to and wish to. As for how the poems come together, well, I don't think we ought to talk about how to translate poetry, really. It's just it's a thing we do that people find mysterious. But in terms of working on these poems, what I do now is I like to amplify specifically Ukrainian voices. So this is what I'm doing at the moment. I'm only translating people who are from Ukraine, and many of them still write in Russian, and that's fine, and I translate their work. And I'm starting to translate from Ukrainian as well.
So if I can jump in, I just want to say that I was never in social media, ever. It wasn't my thing. And when the war broke out, it turned out that friends of mine were telling each other on social media what was going on. And another friend of mine went to Ukraine to be a journalist, and she was posting things on Facebook. So I thought, okay, now's the time to join. And so I went on Facebook specifically to be in touch with all of my friends who were posting this information about the war and what was happening. And I discovered very quickly that a lot of people were posting their poems, people living in Ukraine and living in Russia, all kinds of places. And some of these poems were extraordinary. And I started asking about and around, and someone told me, well, there's this woman, she's a poet herself, Yulia Nemirovskaya. She has this project going, and all these poems are going to be in this collection, and they're going to be safeguarded, and then people can translate them. So I joined the project early on, and it was my way, I think, of trying to do something, because at the beginning of the war, I don't know if we can remember what it was like, but we're all trying to donate and trying to go to rallies and trying to do all kinds of things, but it somehow felt not enough. So this gave me a venue, an opportunity to really do something with whatever it is I could do to make the people's voices heard and to make a bit of a difference.
Thank you, Maria.
I will just add, I already kind of talked about the meaning of it to me, but in terms of where I got poems, at least before I joined Kopilka, I was like doing this for about a year before I actually, Masha pulled me into Kopilka. A lot of it came from a literary magazine. I'll put it in chat. Its Russian name is Точка зрения. Its English name is view.point, and you can find it at litpoint.org, lit for literature, so litpoint.org. It publishes poetry and other literary content, but a lot of poetry of witness and this kind of poetry in Russian, but it also has translations. And now I think it has original poetry as well in Ukrainian, and it has translations into various languages, quite a bit of it in English. So on litpoint.org, the page is in Russian, but you will see the little flags, and if you click on the British flag, you will see a lot of translations. So the poets that I read today, all three of them, I learned about from reading that literary magazine.
Thank you, Yana. There is in chat the viewpoint link. Well, we have time, so Encore? We haven't finished with the poems. It's easy for me to say because I am not in this section. But if translators are willing and prepared, Richard, I am very glad to see Lesa Tyszkowska's face. We have met in Paris and we greet her. I hope she will see this in recording. And by the way, let me remind that recording will be soon online, and we will post it on Facebook and YouTube. And everyone present live, please disseminate the link of this program. Please, Richard.
Thank you. So, as Victor said, Lesia is in France. She moved to France in 2007, but she was born in Kiev. And she is both a poet, a poetess, and a singer. She's done 7 poetry collections and 3 albums. And she wrote this poem, which will come up yes, here we are. She wrote this poem a while ago, but it's just very resonant. It's about her thoughts on leaving Kiev. This city, can you leave it just like that? The air's your lover, holding you a virtual prisoner in its walls. They could strip the Golden Gate for parts, and the ever-present, all-pervasive ear candy drown the bells. You dither at the gate. This is farewell, you know it. The day will start to show, and the dozing bolts will shudder. You'll step outside, but lacking the contours so beloved, and under the weight of memories, you'll take 2 steps and totter. How long will the faint last? What balm will refusal grant? The wind will scour the earth, the sun will dry your grief, and with a shrivelling soul and clinging to every branch, you'll wander along the road, or be carried, some relief. You'd rather not witness the journey. Each forward step is freighted with the knowledge of no return. Better blink and you're breathing alien air. Dusty dreams beat weariness. But wait, if you're still in Kiev, is there no choice between staying and leaving?
The next 2 poems are by Olga Bragina. Olga is from Kiev, and she has returned to Kiev. She and her mother left at the beginning of the war, and she left. She had several literary stipends and grants, and spent some time in Germany and in Poland and the Czech Republic, and is now back in Kiev. But these poems are from the early days of the war. Now I think that I'm finding it hard being an emigrant because I'm talking to people I don't know all the time. I'm talking to people I don't know who ask me what I'm writing, what writers there are in Ukraine. They ask me what writers I've read, why I like Nietzsche, why I don't have children. No, Germany's a tolerant country. And yet I was asked whether I wanted children. In the town hall they looked at my passport warily and said, "You aren't married." As if in the town hall of the village of Waldsee it could possibly matter whether I'm married or not. Perhaps they're worried about some insurance. I don't know. It's funny, and I'm talking to strangers who ask me whether I want children, whether I want money. Yes, of course I want the second. Of course, yes, I tell my mum I saw a film and thought this was surrealism. My mum says, this is reality. What I'm doing during wartime. I'm translating an English novel from the 19th century, a maximally escapist activity. But then I did such things even in peacetime. They say that if the thing you used to do has lost its meaning, it never had any to start with. What I'm doing during wartime. I'm sitting in a tidy little house in a tidy German village, next to the city in which the philosopher Ernst Bloch was born, Here people talk about culture a lot. They say that few people know about our events. There should be more press coverage. The lilacs in bloom, people are walking outside, sitting in cafes. I jump when I hear the noise of a plane. Next to the house is the Rhine, vineyards, life. Thank you.
Apologies, the order of the encore is a surprise to me. Alexander Kabanov. I recently took part in a poetry festival in Tartu in Estonia, and Alexander took part by Zoom. He is, yes, he lives in Kiev now. He was born in Kherson, but he now lives in Kiev, and he took part by Zoom, and he read one of his poems. It wasn't this one, but it was one of his poems. And then the poet that came after in the festival sat there and said, "What are you supposed to say after Kabanov?" So anyway, here he is, Alexander Kabanov. This was fun to translate. That's all I'll say. The Snowman's Son. Wartime snow scattered in flight and denying the old rules their old place has shot us, you and me, outright, and of itself left but a trace. The seventh one, that surplus wing, the snow has laid it carefully down. The other six, whose luck was in, he's brought to the sun below ground, shining in the fire, a skating rink, melts in the laughter of children murdered in the war. It's time to fashion a snow father, but cunningly disposed is death. She's goods for barter in her scales, a bucket for the thorny wreath, a carrot for the cross and nails. I too am a snowman's son, and channel for the Holy Ghost through poems, through the ages long, sight and hearing long since lost. Among the peoples of the world I go, never tiring, ever surprised, and the child killers, each I know by name. I have them memorized. And snow ascends like rising smoke, over embers awaiting an answer, over knowledge that makes me choke, over our victorious banner. Thank you.
I will read another one of Yana's poems. Also a very early one, as you can see. It is month 2. The war is in full swing. All quiet on the Western Front and so forth. But our Eastern Front resounds with spring. The sky's been slashed by spring like an aorta in someone's neck. The South calls out to us more than the Northern snows. And somehow there's growing doubt here how to tell friend apart from foe. The daily headlines have replaced faith, ethics, and whatever else. The days grow longer now apace, and that's a plus. But even vodka fails to help us all forget the victims' faces, and that's a minus. Cue the nightmares. A desperate vein throbs at the temple, while orderlies dash here and there, and doctors remain silent when I tell them that soon there'll come an end, that we'll get through this fucking hell. Our paths will lighten and extend into the sun. Our old forgotten life will raise it from the ashes. It'll burst through. We say goodbye now with hang in there, but I'll end this with I'm embracing you. Thank you.
Again, I don't know if Victor is still connected. So, Victor, I don't know if you want to sort of wrap up or you. I guess you're connected, so you can.
Yes, I am. Thank you. I was just lost. After this, is this our last choice?
Yes. That's the
last slide. Yes. Yes. It was beautiful, Maria. Thank you. And I will invite anyone else who wants to open their microphone. We still have live viewers. We have people from across the globe, as I can see. So it's your chance to comment or ask question. I will thank everyone after this? Please do. Don't be shy. We rarely have such a crowd. Our discussion group is mostly watched in recording, so it's very nice to see that people could spare their time and join us even from far abroad. We have viewers from Ukraine as well. Thank you. Well, if I have no questions, and I will say a few final words as is our custom, but before that, maybe Yana, I give microphone back to you. You want to summarize in some way?
I just am very grateful. I think that sometimes it's hard to hear, you know, this is poetry that is beautiful. But it's looking at something that is sometimes very hard to look at. So I'm always grateful to poets who are able to look at things through their creativity, through that lens. And I'm grateful to people who, in some sense, kind of maybe geographically are far away from what is happening and who are willing to look at it and engage with it at a deep level, as poetry, I think, demands. And also, I'm so grateful to be part of Kopilka. It's a very inspiring group, frankly. To be, we help each other. We sometimes spend like weeks going back and forth on email about some word. So it's a wonderful thing. And thank you for this. I listen to MUkraine usually in recording a lot, and I'm very grateful for this program.
Thank you. I have a question. I see at least one raised hand from Bruce. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to comment that these things that are written about in these poems are a reality, and we know it's a reality. It's very easy to read poems from another time and distance oneself and say, this is something different. This cannot really be a reality. And yet to read them now and understand that they are reality now is to understand also the past, and that the past had its own reality. So it brings not just this time to life, but all times.
Thank you very much for these words. I see a few comments in the chat, if I may. My co-host Katerina Shrey, who had to leave early, says, if I ever doubted the power of poetry, this reading would win me over. A deep and profound thank you to all of our poets and translators in a special way who open new worlds for us. I see more typed comments here from Lisa, who says, I want to thank everyone who organized this meeting, translated these beautiful poems. I felt very strong emotions, a tribute to the work of the poets and their translators. Another viewer says, I don't feel qualified to make any comments. Richard is my brother, and he is the reason why I watched tonight. I haven't always understood poetry, but tonight I realized how powerful a medium it is. Thank you all. And another viewer, Kenneth, says, I deal in parallel universes via quantum computing professionally. So the dissonance of is it reality hits home to me. I agree with Kenneth. We, writing and translating poetry, we deal with parallel universes, not just in every poem, but in every line and every word. There are many of them. We can witness that. I will ask my co-host, Dr. Katerina Shrey, to do the closing words as she joins us back. Katerina, are you here?
Yes, I am. Thank you for the opportunity. Дорогі браття і сестри в Україні, ми зберігаємо вас у наших щоденних думках і молитвах. Нехай милосердний Бог тримає вас у своїй опіці. До наступного тижня. Прощаємося.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
the flower.